Hello, Assalamu alaikum, Sasrikal, Namaste, and good afternoon or good evening wherever you are. My name is Tariq Mahmood, and you are watching us live on JKTV Live. Today, we are going to discuss what happened in on April 1988 in Rawalpindi and Islamabad in Pakistan to some events that I, along with another friend, were a witness to. This event is an event that has caused me great pain over the years. It's an event that took place in Islamabad during the height of the Afghan war, where America was funding a lot of the so-called freedom fighters fighting the Soviet Union. And I have a personal history with it, perhaps even a personal trauma. I've spent many years, and each year at this time of the year, I often remember the tragic events of that day. And I was hoping my friend Imran Munir from Lahore would join me so that we could discuss with you what we saw. And what we saw, we have all lived through terrible times, and we are living through terrible times. But some traumas live with us for a long time. For those of our friends who do not know where Ojhri is, Ojhri was an ammunition dump run by the Pakistani military in very much in the heart of the city of Rawalpindi, which is separated by a road from Islamabad in Pakistan. I was young, perhaps even foolish for some of the things that I did. Certainly, the guest who should be joining me today, my friend Imran Munir, was a bit like me as well. We both worked under the editorship of a great editor in Pakistan uh, for a newspaper in Peshawar, which was called the Frontier Post. And for those who may not know where Peshawar is, it's in the north, not very far from Afghanistan. And I was at home actually in my village in Jhelum at the time when my father came in and said, "Have you heard what happened in Pindi?" I said, "No." He told me that missiles had gone off. He must have been on the outskirts when he heard this. I met Imran. We went to Rawalpindi. And perhaps let me set the setting of the time for you as well, so that as we go slowly through, I can try to share with you some of the general situation of the time. As I mentioned at the beginning, this was the height of the Afghan war. General Zia was in power, quite a brutal dictatorship that held the country to the whims and requirements of the American empire. General Zia was in power. Pakistan was supplying the Pakistani military in particular, and in the specific, under the control of the inter-services intelligence, was coordinating the effort to overthrow the Afghan regime, which itself was being backed by the Soviet Union. And as I said, I was in my village. With Imran, I got to Islamabad, to Ojhri dump, and really, many people use these terms. It was like a scene from the end of days, like Qiyamah. Missiles were falling all over the Twin Cities. You can imagine what death and destruction one small missile can cause in a street. Now imagine tens of thousands of them coming in out of the blue, wiggling along the roads, coming from the sky, screeching in. Some footage has recently emerged online showing the events of those times. Now, I hold no grudges now. I was very angry at the time. I'm just traumatized as time has gone on because I've never been able to put the events behind me because no one ever has been held accountable for the horror that unfolded. Now, how many people died on the day? Some said thousands. Some said the official record was maybe 100, 150, 200. But when we went in, me and my friend, we went right next to the neighborhoods where which had been completely devastated, a bit of a scene out of a dystopian novel, a dystopian science fiction film, whole rows upon rows of houses completely obliterated that were on the other side of Ojhri dump. And inside the dump were truck upon truck upon truck, the carcasses of trucks, all burnt out, but it was still smoldering. We went there and I saw scenes. And as I talk to you, I can feel getting all charged. I don't know who this man was. He lived in a house next to the dump, and the missiles were still going off intermittently now, by the time we got there, not as the main blast that took place before. Intermittently, every now and again, they would zoom off, and everything that goes up comes down to land somewhere. And if you are watching and want to join me, I can see some comments, and I will try my best to, if I can find your comments, and try to answer them as we go along. But I'm not very technically savvy on these on the questions and the comments issue. I can see a little bit them at the moment, and we I saw this man sitting inside a house. As I said, his house was devastated, the upper story in Rawalpindi, adjoining the dump, and he was rubbing his hand on the floor. And next to him was a mongrel dog, black and white, if I remember rightly, maybe reddish brown somewhere. And the man was rubbing his hand on the ground, and he picked up a little shoe. He said, "My son was playing there. This is all that's left of him," or something like that. It really was a scene from hell. And as Imran and I were leaving, I'm not a superstitious man, but the dog looked at us. And if ever an animal can talk, I felt that the dog was asking us, why? I really felt an animal was asking me a question. Why has this hell been let loose upon us? I became quite teary. I didn't know. I didn't know what to say to the animal. I actually didn't know at the time who was responsible for what had happened. All I knew that a hell was being unleashed on an unsuspecting population by somebody. Now, this was a time in which bomb blasts in Pakistani cities or villages were not that uncommon. Who did those? Was it RAW, the Indian intelligence? Was it Khad, the Afghan intelligence? You never know who actually creates an outrage. And you can't judge history or time on the basis of the last outrage. So let's not think about who is responsible for a minute, but simply that the outrage is wrong. We crossed over the broken fence that separated the popular side of the neighborhood next to Ojhri and went into the dump itself. And there, and there, inside the dump, every now and again, as I said, missiles were going off, and I started before. Perhaps I couldn't do it now. Maybe then I was a little foolish and probably too brave for my own good. But we went in. There was a Pakistani military officer present in the dump who agreed to talk to us. We took a vow, both of us at the time, that we would never mention his name. It's a senior general rank or thereabouts. And he sat us down and we said, "What's going on here?" And he said, ask them. He pointed to two men walking around inside the dome. They were Americans. He said, ask them. They know. He sat us down. He was holding a miniature Quran in his hand, very emotional, very charged, and slowly began to explain the horror that was unfolding. There was a horror on the ground above where the missiles were going off, but there was also another horror underneath. And underneath were also where the munitions were stored, and they too went up. And again, at that time, I didn't really understand everything what the general was saying to us. But he made it very, very clear that the official version that was beginning to seep through was nonsense. We began to understand that the missiles that were going on were not the rockets that were flying, were not just rockets. So now let's imagine who could have done this. Yes, the Indian intelligence could certainly have put a bomb under a few trucks and blown the munitions up. Why wouldn't they? That's what intelligence dirty agencies do to each other. Afghans could certainly have done it. Why wouldn't they? Streamloads of people were going from Pakistan into Afghanistan to fight the jihad. And I went into Afghanistan, incidentally, a few times as well during that period. It's not that difficult. Sometimes you can cross the border without even realizing. And people were going across. But the stingers that were going off, even if you threw them, the general explained, that some of the missiles that took off have to be primed. Just by having a terrorist action amidst a load of stored munition would not prime the missiles, not missiles, the stingers. And the stingers was a big part of the story. And as it would unfold, and as he explained more and more to us, I have a hairy back, and I can tell you, all the hair on my back was standing by the callousness with which the civilian population of the twin cities of Islamabad and Pakistan had been exposed to on that day. And he explained what was happening. Yes, a rocket can go up and explode, he said. I'm not a military man. I actually don't understand an awful lot of these things. But a Stinger missile had to be primed, it had to be coded, it had to be launched. And some of the missiles that went on off were primed, others definitely got damaged. But why now, you may be wondering, those of you who are too young, why now, you may be wondering, would this happen? And who could do it? Now, we were not dealing with small amounts of munitions anyway. It was truckloads. And how would they come? They would land in Karachi, that's in the southern part of Pakistan, and shipped over in trucks as a transit route to Ojhri, from where they would be taken and distributed in and around Peshawar on the border of Afghanistan. So we asked who could do it. Round about this time, a helicopter flew over the camp. And he pointed to the helicopter, and that says that's General Zia's helicopter. He's come to inspect it. I don't know if this is all true, whether it was or whether it wasn't. It doesn't matter. To this date, we've never told his name, and we shall continue. Now it's already fading in memory, but it is in my notes somewhere. We shall not. We shall respect him even if he's dead. He pointed to the helicopter. He said, he controlled this camp, not anyone else. And then slowly the story began to unfold. Now, let me share with you a picture. So remember, I mentioned the Stingers. Stinger missiles were used in the Afghan war to bring down Russian aircraft. They were, in some extent, the deciding feature which almost led to the defeat of the Soviet Union. It contributed heavily to the defeat of the Soviet Union within Afghanistan. So what happens? The Stinger missiles were coming to Ojhri, which was under the control, if I am told the right thing, and this is what we believed at the time, of the Inter-Services Intelligence, of the ISI, which itself was controlled directly, not even by GHQ. Again, perhaps some Fojis could tell me I'm wrong and be happy to, but was directly controlled by General Sia and his office. So Stinger missiles were being given by the Americans. They were landing at Karachi, so the story we were told. And from Karachi, they were transported to Islamabad, from where they would go and be distributed. But somewhere along the line, the missiles got taken out and sold in good old Pakistani business tradition. One of the missiles was used by the Iranians in the Gulf at that time. I think it was a helicopter or certainly an American aircraft that was brought down. The Americans sent an investigation team to Pakistan to find out how the missiles destined for the Mujahideen could fall into the hands of their enemies. And the story then has it, in order to undermine the crime, which really it's a business deal, but to undermine what the Americans thought was a crime, the whole evidence was destroyed whilst the American investigation team was in the air. So before they landed, the whole thing was blown up. Now, it could only have been blown up by those who controlled the dump, the ammunition dump, because you couldn't simply put one little explosive under a truck or two and hope all evidence would be destroyed. You need to destroy every single aspect of that evidence. And that day, it was explained. Now, we were really taken aback. We were frightened to some extent. Frightened not so much for ourselves, but further what was then explained to us, because there were rumblings underneath. And to those who say, well, only 100 or so people died and not many people died, it really isn't true. We were told anything up to around 1,800 Pakistani soldiers had died underneath in the storage areas trying to stop the explosions, trying to defuse some of the bombs. How true this is, I don't know. You look at the history of Pakistani military and work it out for yourself. I don't know. But that's what people were terrified of, who went round and harassed and people, asked those who were in power, is it true that there are bombs underneath that could go off? Are we still in danger? Even as ones and twos of rockets would fall in Islamabad and or Rawalpindi, people were terrified. It really was a scene out of hell. Now, I heard other stories which I'll share with you, and I will share other points if I can just go back into my notes for the process. So, what is the point of all my discussion with you today? In a sense, if we don't hold somebody to account for an injustice to us or a collective injustice, the wound never truly heals. But there were many wounds that day, and little stories I will share with you, which incidentally I will show you a book cover of mine. I wrote this book called Song of Gulzarina, in which I tried to exorcise the demons of the time by going in great detail about the memories from that period. And these were some of the memories. Again, I'm talking without notes. My notes are almost run out now. I think it was Hakan Abbasi who was also killed at the time. But I know many friends in whose houses the missiles landed. And many of the missiles landed in kitchens. Well, if you are a Stinger missile, you're a heat seeker. It's quite logical. You will look for sources of heat. But sometimes when processes are unleashed, all the negative isms comes into being, but some courage as well. We heard stories when police had run away from directing traffic at traffic junctions. Students from nearby colleges, I forget the name of the college, may they all rest in peace, they took over the job of directing traffic because the mayhem and chaos that the explosions were creating was in itself as dangerous as the explosive devices. And one of the missiles landed right on top of one of a group of students who were trying to organize safety for the population. The police had discarded and run away. In those days, my own brother was a policeman, and I then went to collect him as well from Rawalpindi. But the other stories I heard, one truly shocking story. A man was running and blood was coming out from the front of him. Again, it's in my novel, this incident and this story. True or not, I don't know. I didn't witness it, but I heard it a few times. Blood was coming out from his front. There were other men chasing him. They caught up to him. Oh, was I there? They caught up to him. And when they caught up to him, they uncovered, and he wasn't injured. He had a woman's arm underneath, and she was wearing the bridal jewelry, and he chopped her arm off. Who this man is, I don't know, but I don't think any good came of him. Now, these horrors were being unleashed, and really, I began to reassess that which I had seen in Peshawar. But it took me 2.5 decades really to come to terms with some of the horrors that I'd seen. And if anyone ever now talks about how the West fought for freedom in Afghanistan, and I feel a whole cringing in my body, remembering what they actually did and who the Mujahideen were at the time. And one of the stories, which is the backbone of my novel, The Song of Gulzarina, was about a young Afghan woman who'd been captured by the Mujahideen. I think it was maybe it was Jamaat-e-Islami. I don't know which group's fighters actually captured her, but she was sold from one group to another. And one of the journalists in Frontier Post, God bless him, I forget his name, he tried to free her, to get her out of where she'd been sold to yet another group. He was captured trying to rescue her, and he had acid poured down into his eyes, and he died trying to get out of the country. And I began to think that this was part of my writer's imaginations until I phoned a friend of mine, Ikram Hoti, and I discussed with him. I said, Ikram, am I imagining all this? Did these incidents really happen? Did that woman exist? Was she really sold from Mujahideen to Mujahideen under the very noses of the French, the British, the Americans, the Pakistanis? This is in Peshawar and on the outskirts of an urban modern city, and some even as far as Islamabad further down. And he said, of course it was. He often would come and share your desk in your office. Now, what becomes then? So I try to exercise the demons that haunted me from the explosions of Ojhri, partly because the reports never got published, partly because I still don't know really, other than the journalistic angles that we found, what it was that happened that day. Well, we know a number of other things with the wisdom of history. Did people in Pakistan and Rawalpindi believe this was yet another attack by a terrorist outfit funded by India or Afghanistan or somebody else? I don't think so. Did we believe that before? Absolutely. Did we believe this was the case? Certainly not. I didn't. And many others didn't. In fact, for the first time in my memory, people would show shoes to the soldiers in Pindi after this event. People were very wise. Not only should the dump have never existed in the midst of a civilian population, it should certainly not have been used to blow them up in their sleep and blow them up in their innocence. Absolutely not. So, what were the consequences then? Let me lighten the mood. A long time has gone by, and we had a long time has gone by, and people sometimes discuss: was General Zia blown up as a consequence of what happened in Ojhri? Well, along with his other generals. Well, let me share with you an image from the time. This is from a good friend of ours called Vial, the illustrator. I'm going to show you the full image once I can get rid of the banner of Remembering Ojhri. Then you can see it in its full glory. Vial, the late and the great Vial, wrote, made this illustration at the time. Humpty Dumpty sat on a mango. Oh, not mango. That's another great novel you can read. Humpty Dumpty sat on a bomb. And in a way, he sums up. But why would somebody make such fun of a general who had ruled for so long? Because it was pretty common knowledge that whatever happened, happened because of a series of social actions that this dictator took. Now, those of you who speak Punjabi, I perhaps once I get some other friends who agree, who were witnesses of the time, to come online, we will do one in Urdu and or Punjabi. You know the dozens of stories that were born about General Zia and his rule, especially post his life. So let us not raise any happiness at the demise or the manner of the demise of General Zia, but certainly to conclude and go back over that time to say, well, even now, this April 2020, the wound of Ojhri is still open. Yes, people have grown up. Yes, have gone by. A lot of time has gone by. Pakistan would be a better country if it could put the ghosts of Ojhri behind. If those who were responsible could be held to account, or even an account given of what the misdeeds they did. My point for today concludes. I thank you for being with me, and I hope if we replay this in Urdu and or Punjabi, we will have some witnesses. Those of you who lived through those terrible times, share your stories, for that's what makes us human beings. And one thing, perhaps I made mistakes in the reporting of the time. Perhaps we were overzealous and spread them out. But the heart and the core of it was that actually it was done. It was an inside job, a crime against the people of Islamabad and Rawalpindi, a crime against humanity. And hopefully, by talking to you next year, I won't have to think about this, for I'll remember that I talked to you last year. May your God be with you.